When you think about the use of Patriot Act 311 sanctions combined with, the investigations, money laundering investigations, it's awfully similar to the methodologies that was used with the Bank of Delta Asia in order to move against North Korea with respect to their illicit activities. And there was a little lesson, I think, in terms of that operation because it was enormously successful in getting the attentions of the North Koreans and cutting off the supply of hard currency that went into that regime. Things got to the point where he couldn't pay his generals. And yet, what happened was that the diplomats really pulled the plug on that operation. There was a situation where he had them dead to rights, and they were sweating out the consequences of that freeze. And it was the diplomatic effort that got them out from underneath the sanctions. I would argue that now is the time, before there's any backsliding on the part of Iran or any attempts, diplomatic efforts to try to move it in the opposite direction. Now is the time to take down as much of that Hezbollah's criminal structure as you can. And I was just going to ask you for your view on the similarities of this and the lessons learned.
Well, with the earlier piece to that, your comments, I mean, it certainly wouldn't be the first time that federal law enforcement and diplomacy bumped heads, but those things sometimes happen. With respect to 311, I believe 311 in the case of the Lebanese Canadian Bank, that was the first time that had been used, and it needs to be used more often.
And I wonder if it could have been used more extensively because, of course, what happened was the head of the central bank in Lebanon simply allowed them to move those accounts to other banks. Now there was some success in terms of grabbing some of the 200 accounts that were used in money laundering, most of it by Hezbollah. But on the other hand, we allowed a public official there to get away with lax oversight, and just to move it to other Lebanese banks. I think we should have expanded it, just like in North Korea. The expansion was used beyond Bank of Delta Asia to any other accounts that were being used by the North Korean regime when we caught them counterfeiting our money and with their other illicit activities. Should that have been done here? Should we have doubled down in order to make sure that we got all of the perpetrators?
Well, I think we should have doubled down, as you say. But even more importantly, I think it's a weak spot with respect to federal law enforcement in general, and and even our greater security apparatus. We need to get better at using sanctions like 311 to drive very nefarious organizations and bad guys into the areas where we can hit them the most, and we're not doing that.
I'm glad you said that because it took us literally years to get Treasury to use 311 on North Korea. Despite we put out a position paper in my office on this. We've been trying to drive the use of this, and it was the central bank governor, Mr. Salama, who decided, to allow those same accounts to morph and transfer into the banking system in other banks under his purview. We should have expanded this operation while we had them. And
well, Congressman, we've talked about this before, and I know we're on the same page. But for the benefit of everyone on the committee, when you hit the bad guys in the pocketbook, you cause them to change their tactics, techniques, and procedures. Anytime you cause them to change their TTPs, they become more vulnerable. They become more vulnerable, we become more successful. It's something that should be used far more often than it is.
One last point. Congressman Duncan of South Carolina and I have written legislation that essentially says, wipe the board clean, set aside your preconceived ideas on this, get everyone in a room, all the agencies in a room, and come up with a strategy to deal with Iran's role in our hemisphere. And I was just going to ask you in closing, putting DEA and other law enforcement on this case, mandating that everybody be a part of it, and coming up with a plan to deal with it. What would you think of that strategy?
I think it would be a great strategy, and it's not Congress's job, but somebody needs to herd the cats. We need to get the right folks into the same room and develop again robust interlocking strategies and plans to affect the kind of impact that you're talking about. That's what we've got to do.
Get the agency and the DEA together on this. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for your testimony today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.